ChatGPT said. Jonathan Blake seemed to have it all. Billionaire, tech mogul, 3 Fortune 500 companies under his belt, and a face that graced Forbes covers like clockwork. At 53, he was at the pinnacle of success, his every word carrying weight, his net worth climbing with each passing year. But behind the polished exterior, Jonathan was quietly falling apart. Not the kind of Hollywood drama where you see the fall coming. No, this was different. It was slow, invisible, like a thief stealing his life piece by piece. It started small. With fatigue, he shrugged off. Then came the migraines that wouldn't quit, digestive troubles that made every meal a gamble, and nights spent staring at the ceiling because sleep had abandoned him. His limbs began to numb at odd times, and some mornings he'd wake up trembling, drenched in sweat, sometimes seeing things that weren't there. Talking became a chore, words slurred, thoughts scrambled, and even simple tasks left him gasping for breath. Yeah, that happened. Over 4 grueling years, Jonathan chased answers, seeing over 50 specialists, from neurologists in Boston to functional medicine experts in Germany and alternative healers in India. He spent millions, but no one could name what was wrong. His health deteriorated, his marriage crumbled, and his kids kept their distance, watching a man they barely recognized slip away. The titan of boardrooms was fading into a haze of unanswered questions and silent suffering. Then one gray Wednesday morning in Chicago, Jonathan found himself wandering into a rundown diner called Grace's Place. Let me back up a sec. He'd just left another doctor's office at St. Matthew's Medical Center, an endocrinologist who told him the same thing every other doctor had. Your labs are inconclusive. Everything looks normal. We'll run more tests. At this point, Jonathan wasn't angry. He was numb, exhausted, starving for some kind of hope. The diner smelled like burnt toast and something faintly hopeful. There were chipped mugs, tired waitresses, and old men buried in newspapers. That's when Ellie showed up. Bright hazel eyes, messy ponytail, apron stained with syrup and scrambled eggs. She was everything the sterile medical world wasn't. Coffee, she asked. Jonathan muttered a barely audible sure, barely looking up. But Ellie didn't just pour and walk away. She tilted her head and softly asked, "You all right?" It was a strange question. Doctors had always asked, "What hurts? When did this start? What are your symptoms?" But no one had ever simply asked, "Are you all right?" Jonathan paused, then whispered, "No, I'm not." Ellie sat down across from him for just a minute. No judgment, no assumptions. She didn't recognize his face from magazines. She saw only a man drained to his core. "What's going on?" she asked gently. So Jonathan spilled it all. Pain, confusion, the endless parade of doctors who saw him as a case, not a person, the money he'd thrown at a problem with no name. Ellie didn't interrupt or try to fix him. She just listened, really listened. When he finished, she said quietly, "That sounds terrifying." Then she added, "Ever think it's not just your body breaking down? Maybe your spirit needs healing, too." Jonathan blinked, surprised. "Are you a therapist?" he asked. She smiled. "Nope, just a waitress who served a lot of broken people." That day shifted everything. From then on, Jonathan came back to Grace's Place every morning, same booth, same waitress, same coffee. Slowly, he learned about Ellie, 27 years old, no college degree, working 2 jobs to support her sick mother. She once dreamed of studying psychology and opening a shelter for abused women, but life had other plans. Jonathan found himself looking forward to those mornings more than his doctor appointments. In a world of sterile offices and medical jargon, Ellie brought warmth, humanity, and hope. She remembered which foods upset his stomach, could tell by his posture if he'd had a rough night. She never pushed for answers. She just showed up. Every day. One rainy afternoon, Jonathan stumbled in looking worse than ever, slumped in the booth, shaking, pale, hands ice cold. "I can't feel my legs," he whispered. Ellie panicked for a second, but then something clicked. She'd seen this before with her younger brother, who'd nearly died from something the doctors missed, mercury poisoning. His symptoms were neurological, erratic, untraceable, caused by fish and metal fillings. She leaned in. "Jonathan, Have you ever been tested for mercury or heavy metals? He blinked. No. Why would I? She hesitated. I'm not a doctor, but please, ask them to test you. Just once. Jonathan laughed weakly. You want me to ask a Harvard-trained specialist to run tests based on a waitress's hunch? Ellie didn't flinch. I want you to ask because you've tried everything else and because I care. It took some convincing, but Jonathan, with nothing left to lose, ordered a heavy metals panel. The results were staggering. Mercury levels 6 times above the safe limit, likely from years of eating high-grade seafood and exposure through unregulated supplements and dental fillings. The mystery was solved. His symptoms were textbook heavy metal poisoning that no one had thought to check. No one had listened, except Ellie. Within weeks of detox protocols and diet changes, Jonathan started to recover. Strength came back, vision cleared, numbness faded, nightmares stopped. He cried when he realized he could walk 2 blocks without help. Months later, he returned to Grace's place with a bouquet and color in his cheeks, only to find Ellie gone. She'd quit without a note. No goodbye. Nothing. Jonathan was crushed, but the manager handed him a folded napkin Ellie had left behind. You reminded me that no matter who we are, we all need someone to believe in us. I didn't save you, Jonathan. You saved yourself the moment you let someone else in. Thank you for letting me be that someone. Go pass it on. Ellie. Jonathan never saw her again, but carried her spirit with him. He founded the Ellie Grace Foundation, named after the diner and the waitress who changed his life. The organization offers emotional support, peer listening, and funds alternative testing for patients without a diagnosis, connecting medical professionals with real people who value compassion as much as credentials. Now Jonathan speaks at hospitals, conferences, universities, not just about healing, but about humanity. I spent millions on 50 doctors, he tells audiences, but it was a waitress with no medical degree who saved my life. Not with science, with sincerity. Sometimes the answer isn't another scan, test, or prescription. Sometimes it's a warm cup of coffee, a quiet question, an open heart, and someone who sees you not as a patient, but as a person worth saving. Kindness heals, compassion transforms, and sometimes, just sometimes, a waitress with no degree can do what $1 billion can't. So, what do you think? Who really holds the power to heal? The experts with all their tests, or the people who listen? Drop your thoughts below. Is it science, spirit, or a little bit of both? Let's talk about what justice and healing really mean in our world today. After Ellie disappeared, Jonathan felt like he'd lost more than just a waitress. He'd lost a lifeline. Days at Grace's place without her felt hollow, like the diner itself had lost its soul. Yet, something inside him had shifted irrevocably. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting back. That he threw himself into building the Ellie Grace Foundation with the same relentless drive that built his tech empire. But this time, it wasn't about profits or prestige. It was about people, those lost in medical limbo, caught between symptoms and silence. Patients whose doctors had no answers, families who felt powerless, and those quietly suffering with nowhere to turn. Jonathan poured resources into alternative testing, peer support networks, and education programs. He invited doctors, healers, and patients to the same table. No egos, no jargon, just shared humanity. But not everyone welcomed his mission warmly. Some in the medical establishment saw his efforts as a threat, a challenge to their authority. You can imagine the boardroom whispers. A tech billionaire backed by a waitress's intuition? Preposterous. Jonathan took it in stride. He was used to being underestimated. But the real battle was personal. His health was fragile, and the detox process was brutal. At times, he felt like giving up, slipping back into the fog that had nearly consumed him. Yet, every morning he'd remember Ellie's voice, her question, "Are you all right?" And he'd push forward. One unexpected ally emerged. Dr. Marcus Lee, a brilliant neurologist who had been skeptical of Jonathan's story but couldn't deny the results. Marcus had spent years entrenched in conventional medicine, But working alongside the foundation opened his eyes. He began advocating for a more holistic approach, blending cutting-edge science with empathy and patient stories. Their partnership wasn't smooth. Old-school colleagues questioned Marcus's soft methods, and Jonathan faced public scrutiny from media outlets eager to paint him as a desperate billionaire chasing pseudoscience. But the duo held firm, fueled by success stories from patients who finally found answers and hope. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Ellie resurfaced. After months of silence, she reached out, not by email or phone, but through a letter slipped under the foundation's office door. She'd left to care for her mother, battling worsening illness, and to regroup after years of sacrifice. She wrote about the toll it took to be the unseen support for so many broken souls, how she needed to find her own healing before helping others. Jonathan wanted to find her, to thank her properly, but respected her choice to remain anonymous, a ghost presence in the story he now shared with thousands. Ellie's disappearance and return reminded him, and everyone watching, that healing isn't linear. It's messy, complicated, and often deeply personal. In one of his recent speeches, Jonathan closed with this: healing isn't just about medicine, it's about connection. It's about someone caring enough to ask the right questions. Sometimes that someone isn't a doctor or a billionaire. It's just a person willing to listen. So now the question lingers. In a world obsessed with data and diagnosis, what role do kindness and human connection really play in our health? How much do we lose when we treat patients as cases instead of people? I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's simple compassion changed everything? Or do you think medicine should stick strictly to science? Drop your story or opinion below, because sometimes the conversation is the first step toward healing.